I am Patti Scott. I'm the president of Hypnosis Institute here in Palm Harbor, Florida. I think everybody on here pretty much knows me, and you can look me up on my website, uphypnosis.com, if you want to know my entire bio and my giant list of ongoing classes and certifications and trainings that I never stopped taking because I love this field. And the reason I started doing these third Wednesday of each month, a few years ago, I started doing this. It's just because I do love this field. I love meeting people in the field. It's not just for hypnotists or hypnotherapists. It's for anybody who's interested, these free webinars. It is also a chapter meeting, considered a chapter meeting of IACT, IMDHA, and also a local not-for-profit Florida-based group called the Hypnosis Education Association. You don't have to be a member of any of those things in order to participate or enjoy these sessions. If the topic interests someone, my intention is that they can get something of value from watching these. Again, in an hour, we can only cover so much. So tip of the iceberg, and then give you hopefully some resources that give you inspiration or some ideas about where you can look further into some of these things, or some ways to study it more. And that's what's nice about this field. You help yourself while you're able to help others. You know, a lot of us come to this field because we did something for ourselves first. I know I started out, I did something healing wise with myself, and I didn't know how I did it. So it made me curious. How did my mind know that I could do that? Where did that idea even come from? And how did I succeed at that? So again, as we help ourselves, we're better able to help other people. And we can serve as an example of just how powerful the mind, body, spirit, or whatever words you have for all of what makes up what you are and who you are, you know, how all of that miraculous design that we are can just do things beyond what our human mind usually can conceptualize on a logical level, as we say. Although we need that part too, don't we? We need the logical mind as well. So. All right. Well, welcome all of you. So let's talk about addictions. Let's talk about addictions. Who in here has ever worked with or had, I know we have a counselor here. We got someone who's been doing hypnosis for a while. Who in here has ever helped people already that have had some addictions? Anybody? Yeah. As a counselor, you've had some, Marcia? Yeah.
I was an addiction counselor, but dealing with kids that had different issues.
Yeah. Because it comes up sometimes, even if it's not the main thing sometimes, right? And here's the thing.
Encounters too.
What's that?
Personal encounters as well.
Yeah, exactly. So we've all had some exposure to either someone or, you know, knowledge of, or seen a movie or a documentary or something. But the main, you know, if you watch TV, you're going to see some things about it, obviously. Addiction is a word that is in the diagnostic codes, right? It is a clinical term. And when I teach addictions in my medical hypnotherapy class, which is where I have it now, I call it substance abuse. And those of us that are hypnotists, we know that's a reframe, right? Addiction means that thing's in control of me. I am powerless, right? Substance abuse puts some responsibility on the person. And that's what I love about hypnosis. We are all about using language once they come to us, language that allows the person to have some control. It's not about blaming them. It's about showing them that they had a part to play in where they are right now. It may be a small part, because a lot of times certain things that come to us for are based on something that happened when they were completely helpless as a child, right? And we know that. So it's not about blame. We take those kind of words out of it when it comes, hopefully, in the way that I do my paradigm of hypnosis and the people that I respect and that I've learned from in this industry. It's about empowering people to realize the way they think about it now, they have control over. They can think about whatever is problematic or challenging in a way that disempowers them, or we help teach them to think about it, reframe it into another way of thinking about it that actually empowers them to have some control over it. And when it comes to true addictions, one of the things about addiction is people feel completely, they have no control. They feel like they are completely out of control. And then the media and the advertisements, and in some ways, unintentionally, I'm sure the medical community feeds into that powerlessness and that victim mindset. When they come to us, we're helping them to move into more of a victor mindset. Like I said, a mindset that says, I might only have this much that I can affect, but if I can change it that much today and change it a little bit more tomorrow and next week and next month, ultimately I can maybe, turn this whole thing around and have control over my impulses once again. So the word addiction, though, again, it's in the commercials, it's in society, it's on TV shows. People use the word addiction for things that are not, according to the diagnostic codes, the manual, which is, a mile high now, isn't a true addiction. People say, I'm addicted to sugar. I'm addicted to coffee. I'm addicted to whatever. They use the word because it's in our vocabulary. Now, if they come to us with those kind of addictions, we're going to know that according to the, again, DSM-5T, whatever it is now, the diagnostic codes, it's not a true addiction because there's very specific parameters for what makes a clinical addiction. And by the way, cigarette smoking, even doctors and people on TV say it's more addictive than heroin. Remember that old commercial? That people get that in their head and they go, yeah, it's harder to quit cigarettes than heroin. No, cigarette smoking is not an addiction because it doesn't meet a single criteria in the DSM codes for a clinical addiction. So realistically, it's not an addiction, but yet people feel out of control. So that word has been, put on it. So that's some of the conversations we can have with our clients to let them know that. Yeah, Ray.
Today I was reading the section actually on substance abuse in the medical hypnosis thing, and there was one reframe that I really loved, and it was called a behavior. And
yes.
I love that word because behavior is something you can control.
Exactly.
Where if you say it's addicted, it puts you out of control.
Absolutely. Behavior. Yeah. All these reframes we do are about getting them to realize it is a behavior. Smoking is a behavior. Eating lots of sugar is a behavior. Even true addictions is a behavior. It is a repetitive behavior that becomes compulsive, right? And makes the person feel out of control. So again, this is going to be more of an overview because this is a really deep subject. And I might do one of my, every few months, I do something called deep dive into something. It's a 3-hour class that's meant for people that are already trained in hypnosis to really delve deeper into some of these things. I've done one on metaphors and I did one on, I think, timeline. I don't remember what they've all been, but regression and some other things. So I think addictions would be a good one to do a deeper dive into, to see, like you said, the nuances of the language and of how we get the client, again, to shift. I think of us as state shifters. I say that a lot, that we help show the person how to shift their state. And if they can shift it a little bit in our office once in a while and feel a little better, they can start to train in the ability to shift it even more and on purpose. And get it to start getting automated then. So we know about anchors and triggers, things that used to trigger the urge. We can do some things with clients that gets that same trigger to produce a different behavior, as Ray said, a different behavior. And once we start talking in those terms, it gives the person the sense that, oh, it's a behavior, then that means I can change it. And to change a behavior, what do they have to change? They have to change a lot of things, but they have to change how they think about that thing that they have been told or that they believe they're addicted to. They have to change an attitude. So, and those are all things we're great at as hypnotherapists. I always say the subtext, we get beneath the surface to those emotional things, those triggers and those belief systems and the attitudes about things. So it's very powerful. So I am going to show a little handout that I actually created it specifically for this little class. I added some things. I love doing these because it gives me an excuse in a good sense to do more research on the things that I'm really interested in. So I keep continuously learning more about things. A little bit of this is from the medical hypnotherapy training that Ray, you'll be seeing some pieces of this, but we'll be going more into some of these things. And there'll be some things here that aren't in the medical. I may add some of them later, but this is just a little bit of a different thing. But I want to talk first about scope of practice. Most hypnotherapists are not licensed, or some people call themselves hypnotists. It depends on where you are and what you choose to call yourself. If you're doing hypnosis for addictions or for substance abuse, which is what I end up calling it once they're in, in my seeing me as a client, you want to know the scope of practice. So that I'm going to cover that a little bit quickly in this handout, and hopefully this will give you a nice overview. So are there any questions before I start this little overview of? So my goal is always to give you a whole lot of information in a short amount of time.
We already
And then if there's more you want to know,
I'm always
referrals,
available.
Scope of practice. Unlicensed hypnotherapists
help you discover
should
or
not
look
work
for
with
some
someone who
more
has a
things.
true clinical,
Or you can do it on
medical
your own, obviously.
addiction. This is going to
That's
be
been
about addiction
diagnosed by a doctor
working with
usually.
addictions.
See, if
with
someone
hypnosis
comes to
and
me and says, "I'm
NLP, addicted, I have an addiction," the first thing out of my mouth is who diagnosed you? Because hypnotists don't prescribe, we don't diagnose, and we don't treat. We only help people with clinical or medical issues if they are referred by the appropriate person who can diagnose and do all those things. So that's the first thing I'll say. And if they're saying they're addicted to sugar and I say, who diagnosed you? They're going to laugh and say, well, it's not a sickness. It's just, I say, well, addiction is a clinical term. So I want you to understand it's not a true addiction. You just have a habit. I'll change it to habit or a behavior, like Ray said, and it's become conditioned response, like Pavlov's dogs, right? We are just like Pavlov's dogs, or animals, not just like, but very similar. We get programmed, we get conditioned, and that's been around we've known that for centuries. And people understand those kinds of things when you tell them that. So referrals, if they're currently in treatment for a true addiction, then definitely I would get a referral. And I think legally in most areas, if not all areas, there may be a few places around the world where they don't require it. I would get it anyway, just for safety purposes. Again, I want someone to know what's going on with this person. If they're currently using, don't do hypnosis with someone who's on a substance when they're in your office. It's not going to be effective. If they're not currently using, but they've been, now this is more the people that have come to me through the years. This is more the situation that it has happened with me. They've been in and out of so many different programs for the same problem, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades, and nothing really stuck. They might be okay for a while or sober for a while, and then they go back. So when none of those things are working, and if they're coming to me because, first of all, that tells me what? They're truly motivated. They really have a lot of motivation, which is always good when we're going to work with someone with hypnosis. If they're still looking for a way to get out of it, that's a good thing in my mind. So again, use your best judgment legally. If they're not currently on anything, but they've been in and out of a lot of things and they really want it to be the end, I would still work with them without a referral. But I would preferably still tell them that because I'm an unlicensed, I'm not a medical doctor and I don't diagnose, I would like for your primary care physician, even though you're not seeing that person for what you're here for, I would still like for your primary care physician to be aware that you're working with me on this problem. And I would request that. And most of the time people, it's not a problem. If you think it's going to be a problem, it might be, but I've never had a problem with that. There's different types of addictions, since we're still using that word because of, that's what the title of this talk is. Types of addictions. There are addictions from the outside that are something from the outside coming into the system. In other words, a substance that the person is ingesting, alcohol, drugs, illegal drugs. These days, frankly, I get more people that are addicted to legally prescribed medications, and they just want to stop doing that. Caffeine is something that someone could come to you and say, I'm addicted to. And again, we're gonna change that to a behavior. We're gonna change that to a conditioned response. It's not a true addiction. It's more of a habit that is now something that they're craving. These days, it's not just coffee. There's these caffeine type products and all these energy drinks that a lot of very young people are, you know, in the vocabulary that we're using, are pretty much addicted to these things. They have to have them. Sugar or simple carbohydrates, someone that eats a lot of ice cream or a lot of candy all day long. Cigarettes, again, in our realm, we know it's not a true addiction, and we're going to reframe that very quickly. But people will come to us with that, claiming it's an addiction, and maybe even their doctor uses that word. The other thing is and people forget this one, performance enhancing supplements. People that are seemingly healthy, that are working out a lot, or that are bodybuilding or something, or doing some kind of athletics, there's a lot of supplements, they call them nowadays, that aren't necessarily going through the Food and Drug Administration, that have substances that give people a kick, that affect their system and give stimulants to their system and their muscles and all that. So that's from the outside substances. And the other type of addiction is inside of the person's body and their brain. The chemical stimulation that goes along with gambling addiction, right? Now in the DSM, there's a list a mile long of different types of addictions. They all have something in common, and it is that brain-body chemical stimulation. Gambling, video games, social media. I just saw another story yesterday on teens and social media and all of the problems they're starting to see in psychiatrists and psychologists' offices and doctors' offices from teenagers who are seemingly addicted to these social media and whatever all the different types are nowadays. Sex or pornography, of course, been around forever. Thrill or danger seeking. There are people that, and even in social media, there's a few people that get in trouble. At least people have told me they see people that just keep looking for more and more ways to video themselves taking risky behaviors, you know, jumping off cliffs and different things. And, you know, they just keep wanting that high. Again, it's chemicals in the body that give them a stimulation that they start to get addicted to that. They want more and more and more. So people can get theoretically addicted to thrill seeking or danger seeking, dangerous behavior. Running or extreme exercise. People can get so overly consumed with those things. I've known a few personally that got to the point where they were truly addicted, in the realm that we're talking about it tonight, to running or to going and exercising every single day. It becomes an all-consuming compulsion, in other words. So let's talk about a little bit about aversion versus motivational therapy styles. Those that have trained with me know that I kind of joke about it. I came up with one day when I was talking about it that I really don't like talking about aversion therapy. I've never been a fan of it. I heard about it and I learned it in my early hypnosis training and decided I didn't want to do it. And I found out I didn't ever have to do it, evidently, because whatever else I was doing was working for the things that they said it might work for, like smoking and some other things. I never used it and had success without it. Aversion therapy, if you don't know, it's using something that is fear-inducing, something that is either disgusting in the realm of cigarette smoking. They used to tell people, and some people probably still do this, you know, if you put a cigarette in your mouth and inhale it, it's going to taste like, and then they give them some hypnotic suggestion that it's going to be something very, very gross, right? That's called aversion therapy. Studies show that it can be moderately successful over a very short period of time. I found a pretty extensive study that said the most success they ever have, even short term, is 50 to 70%. Now, we know with hypnosis, we can work with smokers and other people without doing aversion therapy, and it's going to be permanent in many cases, right? And it won't have that adverse effect. Aversion therapy sometimes can cause abreactions. An abreaction is something where the person gets hysterical, if you don't know what that is, and the counselor does, and I'm sure the hypnotherapist does, but it's having an extreme reaction during the session based on what's happening in the session. It happens sometimes with talk therapy of any kind. Hopefully hypnotherapy, if you're trained well, you know how to handle any kind of a reaction the client starts to have and how to channel it in a way to end up making it actually, in my opinion, those kinds of things that the psychology field calls abreactions, that's in all the psychotherapy books and things, that as a good hypnotherapist, a well-trained hypnotherapist, can use our creativity to channel those kinds of reactions when they're with us into something that ends up being a positive. It actually ends up resolving some deeper issue. And that's my theory. When someone's having an abreaction, it's tapping into something deeper to have an explosive or an extreme abreaction. So that's my theory, and that seems to work in the 32 years I've been doing this. Aversion therapy is fear-based, like I said earlier. It's based in fear. I tend to never want to do anything in hypnosis that's going to create negativity, fear, pain, any of that. I don't think it's necessary. It's never been necessary in my experience or people that I respect in the field that I've studied with. So that's just where I come from. So anything that comes from fear weakens the person. So why on earth would we do something that's going to make them weaker and be afraid of something? Aversion therapy is the antithesis, in my opinion, of hypnotherapy. I think we are just absolutely the opposite of it. Hypnotherapy promotes a positive, forward-looking, motivational style. It's all about now, what can we do right now to make every moment moving forward more positive, more productive, more healthy, all those things. Motivational techniques like the ones that we use in hypnotherapy, they improve self-esteem and self-reliance. Again, causes the person to feel better about themselves and that they have a part to play, that they can make a difference in their situation. So it's very empowering again. Motivational hypnosis produces long-lasting results, many times permanent. Hypnotherapy offers only positive side effects. And that's assuming the person knows what they're doing, hopefully. Even someone, who doesn't necessarily know everything yet or know what they're doing yet, unless they almost intentionally do something silly or try to do something they're not qualified to do yet, they're not going to cause any kind of negative, like I said, abreactions or side effects. Okay. My very first medical hypnosis teacher, which was the first year I started hypnosis, a gentleman in Arizona named Dr. Michael Preston. He wrote a wonderful book called Hypnosis, Medicine of the Mind, and he died, I believe it was in 2018, maybe, or I don't know. Anyway, he died a few years ago. He says, it's important to understand the difference between addiction and compulsion. Addiction is the symptom caused by the chemical imbalance. Compulsion is the relief being sought to remove the symptom. That's a reframe. That's a beautiful reframe. And if you think about addiction as a symptom caused by a chemical imbalance, again, it could be a chemical that has been ingested, or it could be the chemicals in the body responding to a video game or to something else, right? That is thrilling or exciting or whatever, over and over, gambling and, all those kind of things. So a compulsion is seeking relief from that. So it's just a kind of a nice reframe. So to remove, and it's really wanting to remove the symptom called addiction. So in other words, addiction is the end result of someone getting that hit, that chemical hit in their body for whatever reason, over and over and over until they're out of control. And they're looking for relief from that. SAMHSA, which is the, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health something association. I can't remember what all the letters mean. Their definition of recovery changed in 2011. And by the way, that was partly because of the influence from the fields of hypnotherapy and neurolinguistic programming, because they started showing a whole different attitude and a way of addressing these kinds of problems. And they were getting some better results than that current psychotherapy was getting at the time. So they changed their definition of recovery in 2011. And here's what they changed it to. It's a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. Doesn't that sound like something that we would do with our clients, right? It doesn't sound like something from the medical or the mental health community. So bravo to them for paying attention. Self-directed. They're not the victim anymore, according to that definition of recovery. So again, it was because they're starting to see the advantage of having that person take charge of their situation, showing them how to handle it, showing them how to develop skills and access resources and take control over their own lives and their own behaviors. I think that's just so beautiful. So emotional implications of addiction, of course, there's probably a lot more, but the main one's anxiety, depression, which can sometimes lead to thoughts of suicide when it gets extreme, guilt, self-loathing. There's always an element of the person having some self-loathing, which can be self-hate. It can just be lack of confidence and all of those kind of things. Now we get to hypnotic outcome protocol. I didn't type it in here, but Dr. Eric Rosen is a local psychologist that I've been working with for many years on a book. Too many years, actually. We need to finish it at some point. But he's got we do a lot of brainstorming. And one day we said, when people go to a doctor or a mental health person, they come up with a protocol or a treatment plan, right? They come up with a treatment plan. We wanted to come up with a term for professional hypnotherapists when they're working with serious issues that are clinical or medical. And we came up with together, I wanted something that sounded upbeat, of course, hypnotic outcome protocol. And I didn't put it in there, but the acronym is HOP. I like that because it represents an upbeat kind of an idea, right? Hypnotic outcome protocol represents once we've done the interview for that session, how and what do we determine is going to be the direction. And of course, as things happen during a session, that direction can keep moving because the sessions, as those of us that are hypnotists know, kind of takes on a life of its own. And you want to be flexible enough to move in the direction that the session is wanting to go, according to what's happening with the client, not according to the steps that were in the technique that you learned in hypnosis school 10 years ago, right? Oh, wait, we skipped step 3. You're going too fast. Let's stop and go back. No, you go where the client's mind is ready to go. So hypnotic outcome protocol for addiction, we're talking about stress reduction techniques will be part of that. Because it's, again, anxiety is going to be a part of anybody that comes with an addiction. Just having to go seek help for something that they term or someone else told them is an addiction is stressful. No one wants to ask for help. No one wants to feel out of control. So it's very stressful, creates anxiety. So we can teach them some simple breathing exercises. We can help them in our office within the first 5 minutes to relax a little bit. We can do a progressive relaxation with first-time clients, no matter what they're there for. And I know I've heard other hypnotists at seminars and through the years that say, oh, I never take that much time. Blah, blah, blah. I'll tell you what, it's a gift. When you do a progressive relaxation with your client the very first time, and especially if they've never been through a hypnotic process before, it is so amazingly appreciated by their mind, by their body. It's just such a beautiful thing to be able to help them to de-stress. So progressive relaxation, and then we can teach them how to do it for themselves. There's a thing called quantum focusing. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. A beautiful gentleman that I loved in this field, Michael Elner, who passed away a few years ago, just not that many years, about I think 3 years ago. He was such a beautiful man. I'd learned so much from him. And along with a gentleman, Barsky, trying to think of his first name. I didn't know him personally, but he, David, maybe Bar, I don't know. Anyway, Elner and Barsky came up a very simple, it's something you can teach your client in 3 to 5 minutes again, like breathing exercises. You can teach them in the pre-talk, and you can help them to learn how to do it on their own at home. So quantum focusing, we don't have time to go and do it here. Maybe I'll do a class on that sometime separately, but you can look it up. Emotional freedom techniques. Some of you are familiar with EFT, tapping. It's free. The manual is free out there on the internet. It's everywhere, and it's a ritual of something you can teach the client. And of course, in the next section, I've got self-hypnosis training, but I think that's part of all of this. As you're doing things with your client, hopefully as you're teaching them and talking them through something like this, you can always say, and when you're at home, you can do it like this. You can do this for yourself, because why would you not do that? The next section, which is a hypnotic outcome protocol, would have to do with ego strengthening. Again, people that are addicted, that have an addiction, that have been suffering with it even for a short period, and definitely those that have chronic addictions, they have a lot of self-image, self-loathing, low self-esteem, all of those things. So we can do something called changing your ID. Now, I came up with that little acronym ID, which is connected with their internal dialogue, because a person's internal dialogue, how they're talking to themselves in their mind and how they describe themselves to people, that means that's also how they describe themselves in their own mind. That's affecting their belief system about their identity. It keeps reinforcing, I'm a horrible person because I'm doing this, because I ruined my life and I have these problems. Yeah, Ray, go ahead. Jump in.
The word ego, strengthening, the first thing that pops in my mind with the word ego, something on a negative side, someone who's full of them in a negative way. Yeah. So when I saw ego strengthening techniques, the first thing was toxicity in male or females who want to use their ego to control. So and
that's why we don't. Yeah. And by the way, that's why we. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm saying, so how do you, if I'm with a client and they say, well, ego is a negative word, what would you do to reframe that?
I'm glad you asked me that, because I don't use that word with clients. That word is in here because it's in all of the hypnosis literature. That's it's a very unfortunate term, which is, frankly, it's left over from Freud. And frankly, Freud is the one that polluted the word ego. He made it into a bad guy, a scary guy, that part of us that has all that other stuff. So I don't use it with clients. I only put it in handouts for hypnosis because it's in all the hypnosis literature and books. And it is an unfortunate term. And like I said, I would never talk about ego with client. I would talk about, how they feel about themselves. What is your self-description? Those kind of, and that's how they would talk as well. So thank you for bringing that up, because again, it's only there because it's in all the hypnosis books and literature. And it is an unfortunate term. Maybe we'll come up with a better way of saying it, even for hypnotists, but that's what they call it, to help the person feel better about themselves. That's what it is. So maybe you could come up with a new term, Ray, and we'll change the whole formula of, because that's what we do. We reframe things. Like I said, it's like I'm using the term addiction here. I never use that term. Once the person's come in my office, I start out with that if they're using it. Just like with pain, we have to step into their world so that they know that we're listening to them and that we're respecting where they are right now when they walk in. But our job is to get them to start moving into a better place. And that means we won't use those words anymore. But ego, I would never use that term with a client, just to clarify that. So thank you for
Strengthening self instead of ego.
self-strengthening. Yeah. That would be a good way to change that. Yeah. And again, it's in all the books. So I don't know. Yeah, it's just there. That doesn't mean we have to keep doing it though, does it? Just like
No.
these other things.
Right.
So changing their identity, we can help them. There's techniques for that. I have some things I developed. I'm sure there's a lot of them out there. There's a thing called, and this is relatively new. Well, I guess I can't call it new anymore. It's been around 10 years or so. DTI, everything has an acronym. Deep trance identification. I don't know if any of you have heard of that. Someone came up with this, and when I first heard about it a few years ago, everybody was so excited about it. And so I went and took a class on it at one of the conferences. And when I was done with the class, I said, oh, it's method acting. Well, that's really what it is. You put yourself into an altered state, just like for those of you who may not know, I spent 20 years as a singer and an actress and songwriter before I got into hypnotherapy. So my 20s and 30s, that's what I did. And that's why I said it after I saw what deep trance identification was, that's exactly what it is. You take the person, you have them close their eyes and take on the clothing, the gestures, the voice, the stature, the posture, the attitudes, the belief systems of the person that they imagine. In this case, we're talking about changing their self-identity of who they want to be, who they believe, in their mind, the best person that they could be. And then when you bring them out of that little mini trance, the idea is that they will, for a little while, act that way and feel that way. And you can anchor that then. You can get that, into a place where they can start to say, yeah, I can feel this way, even if it's short-lived. And then you can start extending that and teaching them how to extend that feeling. But that's what deep trance identification is in a very, very brief thumbnail version. It's much more extensive for those people that do it. Self-hypnosis training, again, to me, that is in every session when you're working with substance abuse. Resource access and activation. We're helping people to access resources because if they're addicted, again, they feel helpless. We want to show them that they still have the strengths, the experience, the whatever that they, had before they became addicted. And we can re-access some of their past successes. I actually worked with a gentleman who came to me to, let's see, what was he doing? He came, I think it was just to quit smoking. And he had a heck of a time, trying everything in the world, as some of them do. And then I found out he had overcome years earlier full-blown addiction to narcotics. And all of it, I got really excited. And I thought, oh my gosh, if he can do that, if he had within him to get that done, what a great place to draw, because it's the same strengths and resources that got him to do that will obviously help him kick something as simple as a smoking habit. So we can help them to pick up from their past moments of success whenever they did something challenging that gave them a little bit of confidence, that gave them a little bit of self-esteem, anything that's a positive resource or emotion will help to empower them for what their current challenge is. So we can help them to access it. We can anchor those things in. There's a nice little process called Circle of Excellence. I don't know if you're all familiar with that. You can look that one up on the internet. There's a million different ways to do it. It's part of my NLP training when I do my 2-day NLP training, because it's very simple. And it's a nice way to stack resources, to access one and anchor it in, break state, access another resource, anchor it in into exactly the same place, do a break state, anchor another resource. And sometimes I'll do 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever. And then the way that I do these things, because I always figure, I'll be asking the client, what is it you think you need? What is a resource that you're going to need to get this done? And they might say patience. They might say confidence. They might say something else, motivation, something else. And then I'm going to say, well, you know what? Maybe your logical mind that we're talking to here hasn't come up with all of the things that you're going to need, but I happen to know you have an unconscious mind that knows everything that you're going to need to get this done. And you may not even have to know what it is on a conscious level. So just I'll have them close their eyes and I'll talk to that part of them that knows what else they might need, what else is necessary within them to access and make available to meet this challenge. And I'll anchor that in, even if they don't know what it is. And you can do that. You can do these things with hypnotic language. Sometimes the more vague and the more abstract it is, the better it works, because then their logical mind isn't in there trying to figure it out and analyze it and critique it and all that stuff. So Circle of Excellence is a beautiful process. There's as many different ways to do all these things as there are hypnotists. Like I said, it's when you're with a client, it's usually never the same way twice anyway. So, you have the general template and then you let the session go wherever the client's mind seems to want to go. I have something I developed called pivotal response conditioning that I teach in all my trainings and that I teach every single client. And I developed it during my first early years in the field because I was already signed up for a degree program and I was studying all these things and NLP and hypnosis and all that. And I developed this thing called pivotal response conditioning to give my clients and to teach people how to instantly create a shift changer. And again, because we can shift states instantly, we all know how to do it. Everybody's done it at some point in their life, many times probably. So we can teach our clients, and we ourselves can learn how to do it for ourselves, how to shift off of a unempowering state and instantly empower ourselves to get more focused, to get stronger, to get more confident, to get clear-minded, whatever it is that we need. So pivotal response conditioning, that's another class. Like I said, add a resource. If you've trained in NLP, there's a nice little NLP technique you can look up online. It's called add a resource. So that's a nice little one. Stacking resources is kind of a different way of doing the Circle of Excellence, because you're accessing multiple resources and you're stacking them. You're adding, each one adds power to the previous one. And before you know it, you've got a trigger that you can set off, that the client can learn to set off, that brings all of the resources to availability in a moment. That's the goal anyway. So what kinds of techniques and approaches are best for addictions, for substance abuse, if you will? Timeline techniques. I do some form of what I would call a timeline technique in almost every session. And generally with a true addiction, if it is a referral and they've had a history and it's one of these longer term things, I'm going to require a 12-session commitment. That's the way I do it, because I don't want them to say, well, I thought I'd try something else, once or twice, because that's unrealistic. I'll have people that come to me that have been in therapy with someone for 3, 5, 10 years. And then they come to me and they go, well, I thought I'd try a session or two. Really? Really? That's what you're expecting this, And I tell them, I expect people to have results after the very first session, during the very first session. But if you've been, fighting this addiction, if that's what it is, for all of these years, it's a little bit unrealistic for you to come to me and expect a turnaround in that quick of a time. I say you need a little more commitment, and it's going to take some time to condition, because again, we got to get through those layers. It's more getting to those emotional things that it takes a little time to get to for something like any other chronic condition. Although sometimes they feel great after 1 or 2 sessions, like I'm raring to go, I still want to make sure they've got their momentum going and they've sustained it for a certain length of time, so that they have the confidence to know this isn't just a quick fix that's going to wear off in a few weeks or something, or in a few days or whatever. So timeline techniques, because everything has a history. Every person has a history with their problem. Everybody is there, has a right now what's going on. That's the reality of the result of whatever's been going on in their history and how they are thinking about it right now. And our part of what we do is we get them forward focused to what is the outcome that you're wanting. What is it that we're going to start moving toward? So everything has a past, a present, and a future. In a hypnotic session, there's going to be elements of a timeline, because that's what timeline's about, in all, I think, in every session, because their mind is working to figure out, how do I take care of the stuff in the past that got in the way of this? Now change that so that I can move forward with some new ideas about it. Parts therapy, parts integration, that's a whole training in and of itself. Some of you are trained in it. There's, again, as many ways to do that as there are people out there in the field. Mapping across some modalities is an NLP technique where you take something that the client, like I use the example of the person who had overcome drug addiction, who wanted to quit smoking. So in that case, I would bring up how they think about drugs now. If someone walks up and offers them a drug, what is the image that comes to them? Because now it's just like, no way I would ever touch that again. So you want something like that in their history. That's a perfect example. You can bring that up. And submodalities just means, what are the details? Telling you, have them close their eyes. What do you see? What is it moving? Is it a picture? Is it, are there smells? Is there texture? All of these different things. Does it have a feeling or a sound? And you get all the submodalities, all the details of what it's like when they are presented with that old thing that they have no problem saying no to. And then you get the submodalities of the current one that they can't say no to in their mind. And you start crossing over the submodalities from the thing they don't have a problem with anymore onto the current problem. You give it those characteristics, in other words. That's a real quick explanation. And it's a beautiful thing that you can do that can really make a big difference with people. So that's mapping across some modalities, not just for addictions. It's a great process for many things. And then my first medical hypnosis teacher, again, Dr. Preston, he had something he called the library technique that he developed, and it's broadly used and talked about in his Hypnosis Medicine of the Mind book. And he literally used a version of the library technique with every single client he saw. And he did mostly medical hypnotherapy. Now, he would adapt it to each client. There were little elements that would change, of course, with each client. But the general process, he did the same one with everybody. It was the same process. So that it's that flexible. And that's that. There you go. So I will email you all, if I have your email address, which I'm assuming I do. I will email you that handout. So this hour goes fast. That was a real quick overview, and I don't always do PowerPoints, but for this one, I thought it was a nice way to cover a lot of, because this is a complex issue, right? Was there anything in there for those of you who've worked with this or just know something about it from people you know or something? Anything that you would, and you've already brought up some beautiful points. Like I said, this is for you, for learning purposes. It's not about using those terms. Like I said, I don't use the word addiction. I throw that out the window during the first session. It becomes substance abuse. For you, Ray, in the medical hypnotherapy, it's called substance abuse. That's the title of the module. I don't even use the word addiction in there at all. This was because the word that I put out for this mini webinar was so people know what we're talking about. Again, with your client, if they walk in saying addiction, the first thing I'm going to do is not to say, I'm not going to change it right then. I'm going to get some rapport first, right? We want to get rapport. We want to meet them where they are and respect that this is what they believe, that they're addicted. Even if they're saying addicted to sugar or something, I'm going to take a little bit of time to get some nice rapport. I'm not, because people don't want to be told they're wrong. It's not a good way to get rapport. Oh, look, I saw a kitty tail. I don't miss those things. Yeah, I saw that little kitty tail.
That's Boots.
Boots.
Yeah.
I love kitty cats. Okay, so anything else though? Like I said, that the reframing we would do with clients. This is just for training purposes that it used some of those terms like ego strengthening. Again, if somebody took a hypnosis course, that's what it was called usually in their course, ego strengthening things. but you're not going to talk that way to your client, obviously. And I think we need to change the industry term for that anyway, because Freud really did pollute that word ego. Ego, the real meaning of it is very benign. It doesn't mean anything bad, but he kind of made it sound bad, like that scary part of you that's going to make you do horrible things.
Well,
So anyway, any comments, anything else that you'd like to add, and like I said, if you don't agree with some of the things I said, that's fine. I love hearing people's rationale for what their ideas and their approaches are. If you like aversion therapy then it'll probably work for you with your clients. As long as you're congruent with whatever you're doing and your client trusts you, whatever you do is probably going to work. I just don't happen to like telling people something that's designed to scare them or to gross them out. It just doesn't match up to me to what this feel's about. So like I said, you don't have to agree with me. I respect whatever works for you. Yeah.
Kind of contradicts.
Go ahead, Ray first, and then we'll go to Marcia.
No, I was just saying that I do agree 100% that the word addiction is overused and used incorrectly most of the time. So yes, that's something that I'm learning to talk to my clients about when they talk about addictions also.
Yeah. Like I said, unless it's a diagnosis, and if it is an addiction that's not diagnosed, by the way, I'm going to say, well, that's outside of my scope of practice. You need to go and get that evaluated by the appropriate mental health professional, whoever you prefer to go to. Talk to your primary care physician and they'll know who to refer you to or whatever. We don't diagnose, we don't prescribe. And Marcia, did you have something you wanted to?
I was just going to say the aversion therapy sounds to be almost like it kind of contradicts the whole thing, the positive outcome. I mean, here you're trying to get a client to relax and get total peace of mind and be in this peaceful trance. And then you put in, and you're going to think of a bowl of snakes every time you do this, Yeah.
There was a psychologist here in town that was a medical hypnotherapist who actually was friends with my teacher out in Arizona, I found out. And he was an older gentleman. He was real different, and he used the library technique with every client. But he also would tell people, he worked mostly with weight loss. And he also would tell people, I found out the hard way because he was out of town. And he asked me to fill in for an interview that the local TV station wanted to do about the library technique. And he knew I knew it because I studied with Preston. And he said, they want to do this and about this client that I had that lost over 100 pounds. And they want to do an interview so you can explain to them what the library technique is. And I said, oh yeah, no problem. I can do that. So they're interviewing me and they didn't tell me what they were going to say or ask me. And I didn't know the person, the woman or anything that he had worked with. I just knew he wanted me to explain the library technique. And while they're talking to me and interviewing me, the lady says, and from what I understand, he would tell, whatever her name was, I'll use the word Mary. He would tell Mary that every time she sat down to eat, that she would eat half of the amount of food that was on her plate. And right away, I'm thinking, well, that's not part of the library technique, and she said she would eat half of the amount of food on her plate. And if she tried to take another forkful, that she would see cockroaches crawling all over her plate. That's aversion therapy. And I'm on camera as she says this. So if they could have seen what was going on inside of me, it would have been pretty interesting. But being an actress, thank goodness, I quickly came up with something like, I remember something, because I'm like, what am I going to say to that? I'm not going to say, oh my God, I would never do that, because I'm representing him. He's the one that got her to lose 100 pounds. And what I said was, well, you know what? Because I could tell the woman was like grossed out even saying it. And I said, well, that's interesting. And I didn't realize that, but you know what? If that worked and she lost over 100 pounds, that must have been exactly what her mind needed to hear, or something like that. I saved it and then I moved on to whatever the next question was. But inside I'm going, holy cow, I wouldn't say that to a client in a million years. First of all, I would never say eat half the food on your plate. To me, that's so superficial. That's just not the way I work. And when I work with weight loss, some people might know this about me, I almost never talk about food. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a dietitian. I'm not qualified to talk about that. Most adults know what gets them in trouble. I'm dealing with, again, the subtext. I'm dealing with what's beneath the surface, the emotional part of it, the habit part of it, the conditioned responses, the self-image, all of that stuff. Their logical mind can decide to use a smaller plate or can decide to put the fork down and chew 30 times, all that stuff. You can read that out on the internet or a book or something, but I don't feel like that's kind of superficial. Now, if they tell me that their goal is to chew 30 times, to put their fork down and chew 30 times each mouthful, then I might incorporate that somewhere in the hypnotic process, just, as a post-hypnotic suggestion toward the end, maybe. If it's something they said, or they want to eat more vegetables, I might say something like, you'll notice all the color on your plate and that you're choosing foods that have nice, fresh, vibrant colors and things like that. But I'm not going to say that because it's my idea or it's my opinion, because I'm not a dietitian or a nutritionist. Maybe that person shouldn't be eating so many vegetables. Maybe they're eating too many. I don't know, what do I know? So I don't go there. That's not my realm. That's outside my scope of practice again. So did that make sense? But that's aversion therapy. And in a million years, I would never say something like that to a client. But it was an interesting experience. And it reminded me that it's good to be a really good actor, because your client might say something that's outrageous. I mean, those of you that do this work or work with any kind of counseling or anything, you're going to hear crazy stuff from people, and you can't react like it's something horrible. You have to put on that face of understanding, acceptance, and respect, and non-judgmental, in my opinion. Non-judgmentally accept whatever your client says as true for them. As outrageous as it might sound, it's true for them. So I'm going to just act very like it's the most normal thing I ever heard. And you have to also determine if it's something that is something they disclose that's immoral or that would be unethical in your mind working with the person. That's when I would refer them to someone else, because you have to also feel okay with what they're asking you to help them with. Right? So if they're asking you to help them, with, well, I'm not even going to offer any examples. Your mind can go to the creative side of that. But once in a while you get a request that's, you can tell right away, no. And the way I get out of things, again, respectfully, is I say, this sounds like it's really outside of my scope of practice or my, my education in this field. So I'm going to refer you to someone else. And the doctor I talked about that I was doing that interview for, the older gentleman, I knew that most of the stuff he worked with was sex issues, and because I could tell from all his books he had, and he was a licensed psychologist as well, and he did a lot of weight loss, right? So I would usually, when he was still in practice, he's retired now, I would refer anyone that called me about sexual issues, if it was someone I felt uncomfortable with, I would just refer him to him that way. I'd say, that's really outside of my education, my scope of practice, but I know someone here in the area. So it's nice to know what other people are specializing in, so you can nicely refer them respectfully, Any other comments? Do you get something out of that? Yeah. Yeah, Ray.
For substance abuse, what do you think about regression, whether it's early life, past life? Do you ever tried that?
Yeah. Well, past life is something I think people should get quite a bit of training in, like specialty training in, if they're going to do that intentionally. I don't do it intentionally, although it will show up unintentionally sometimes. I can't say I've never done it intentionally. I've had a few clients that wanted to do but I make real sure what their purpose is for doing it, before I go there. Regression work, like I said, timeline is a form of regression. You're always going into the past during each session, because that's where all the stuff is that they brought to what's the problem now. Everything's got a history. So to me, there's a form of regression in every session. And we always want to get to, where did this start? What was the initial sensitizing event, as we say, or the root cause? It may not be in the very first session, but I think there's always things that the mind can start to resolve or access from the past in each session. And I'm not one of those that thinks you need to do that immediately and go right to the root cause, because some people need to get a little bit more confidence first, need to feel a little more comfortable. I figure their mind will uncover that when it's safe and when they're ready to do it. And that's another way to avoid abreactions, because regression work, it is one area that's a specialty where people can produce abreactions because they don't know how to resolve. They open a can of worms and then all of a sudden they don't know how to resolve it. And I've had some people that came to me from people who did something like that, and they've had nightmares and they just left them, they didn't know how to resolve whatever they started. So I think it's a good idea, if you're going to do intentional, especially past life regression, to or regression for any kind of trauma or that type. And you don't always know if it's an addiction. It might have been a trauma when they were 4, you don't know. So it's good to get some experience so that you know what to do should that be uncovered. And we know there's techniques of association or dissociation. And the general rule is you never want to associate, when you're doing regression work of any kind, into a trauma. You do it from a safe, protected distance. You create a lot of protection, you create a lot of safety, a lot of comfort, and you get them to, be aware of whatever's helpful from a distance of dissociation, which only means they're not going to feel the effects of anything that might be uncovered that might be a trauma, because then they can get re-traumatized. That's what the old psychotherapy used to do. Let's go relive that trauma again, relive it again. And wasn't it bad enough the first time? Every time I go to the doctor now, I got to relive it again and again and again. They just keep re-traumatized, and most of the time it didn't help very much. So, it's just not a good way to resolve things usually, in my opinion. So anyway, any other questions or comments? I'm so happy you all showed up. It was very nice to see you all. And this will be recorded. And a lot of videos out on YouTube from past 1-hour webinars, and they're all good for 1 hour of CEUs. A lot of the organizations, including IACT and IMDHA, a certain number of CEUs every year you can do by watching videos or reading a book, those kind of things. So you can have fun and learn and get some CEUs. So I hope I see you all again soon. And next month, like I said, we'll be talking about motivation.
Well, thank
I
you
will
very
see you
much.
Saturday.
That's right. I'll see you Saturday. Nice to see
Thank
you,
you.
Jose.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your week, and I hope your situation resolves and you use some of these techniques for yourself, because do it for yourself. And connect with me or talk to me if you want some assistance on anything, or any ideas, or want to brainstorm. I'm open to it.
I wish you
Okay.
the very best, Jose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Back.
Thank you
That's
much.
right. This will be good practice for you to be able to help even more people. That's right. Okay, we'll see you next time, hopefully. Take care.
Okay.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.